The silent passenger. I swear I was alone when I got into that Uber. It was just past midnight and the streets were empty, washed in the dim glow of flickering streetlights. I had spent the evening at a friend's house, lost in conversation, and didn't realize how late it had gotten. The moment I stepped outside, a thick fog had rolled in, swallowing the city whole. I pulled out my phone, ordered a ride, and within minutes, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. The driver barely acknowledged me as I got in, just a slight nod, his eyes glued to the road ahead. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The car smelled faintly of stale air and something else, something metallic. I tried not to think about it. As we started moving, I pulled out my phone to check messages, but I had no signal. That was odd. I had full bars just a minute ago. I glanced up at the rearview mirror and froze. There was someone else in the car. A man sat in the front passenger seat, perfectly still. He was dressed in dark clothes, his face slightly turned away, but I could see the edge of his profile. My chest tightened. I hadn't seen him when I got in. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. The driver hadn't even mentioned him. I swallowed hard, my voice barely above a whisper. "Hey, I didn't see anyone else when I got in." The driver didn't react. My pulse quickened. "Is he with you?" The driver's grip on the wheel tightened, his knuckles turning white. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, then back to the road. "Don't talk to him." My stomach dropped. The air in the car grew thick, suffocating. I could hear my own breathing, too fast, too shallow. My fingers trembled as I tried to act normal, gripping my phone like a lifeline, even though I knew I had no signal. I looked at the man in the front seat again. He was still motionless like a statue, but then, almost imperceptibly, his head turned a fraction of an inch, just enough for me to see his reflection in the side window. There was nothing there, no face, no features, just a dark, empty void where a human face should have been. I choked on a gasp, pressing myself against the door. My instinct screamed at me to get out, to run, but the car was still moving. The driver's voice was low, almost trembling. "Keep your eyes forward, don't look at him." I couldn't move, couldn't think. The air turned icy. My breath fogged up the window. I shut my eyes, trying to convince myself that this was some trick of the light, some twisted prank, and then I heard it, a whisper. Not words, just a sound, low, raspy, coming from right beside me. Slowly, painfully, I turned my head. The man in the front seat was facing me now. I don't know how to explain it, but I felt his gaze on me, even though he had no eyes. The void where his face should have been seemed to stretch like a black hole sucking in all the air. My body turned ice cold, my fingers numb. The whispering grew louder, filling the car, a chorus of voices layered over each other, an endless, unintelligible murmur. The driver gritted his teeth. "I told you not to look." The car suddenly jerked, the tires screeching as we swerved violently. My shoulder slammed into the door, pain shooting through my arm. The whispering stopped. The driver was breathing hard, his hands shaking as he steadied the car. His voice came out hoarse. "He's gone." I didn't dare check. I kept my gaze locked on my lap, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles ached. The air in the car felt lighter, but the terror in my chest didn't fade. We drove in silence for what felt like hours. I forced myself to breathe, to count the seconds, to focus on anything but what had just happened. Finally, we pulled up in front of my apartment. I fumbled for the door handle, practically falling out of the car. The night air hit me like a slap, but I didn't care. I just needed to be out. The driver exhaled sharply, rubbing his face. "You were lucky." My voice cracked. "What now was that?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "He gets in sometimes. No one knows how." My stomach twisted. The driver looked at me, eyes dark with something I couldn't name. "You should be careful next time." Before I could say anything, he drove off, disappearing into the night. I stood there, frozen, staring after the taillights until they vanished. My skin was still cold, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I didn't sleep that night, and I haven't taken a ride alone since. Story number 2. Wrong turn. I should have never gotten into that car. It was a late Friday night, and I was exhausted from work, barely able to keep my eyes open. The streets were empty, the air thick with humidity, making everything feel slow and heavy. I had just left my office, eager to get home, so I pulled out my phone and requested an Uber. Within seconds, a notification popped up. Driver arriving in 2 minutes. A black sedan pulled up to the curb just like the app said it would. The windows were dark, too tinted for me to see inside. When the car stopped, the back door clicked open. I hesitated. Something about it felt off, but I was too tired to care. I slid into the seat and shut the door. The driver didn't greet me, didn't ask how my night was, just nodded once and started driving. His face was barely visible in the dim light of the dashboard, but I caught a glimpse of a short beard and hollow-looking eyes. I pulled up my phone to check the route. Straight home, 20-minute ride. I exhaled, leaning back, staring out the window as the streetlights flickered past. A few minutes in, I noticed something strange. The driver missed a turn. I sat up slightly. Maybe he knew a faster way. I didn't say anything at first, just kept watching the map. But then he missed another turn. My stomach twisted. "Hey, I think you missed the last 2 turns." No response. The car kept moving, smoothly, deliberately. I checked the app again. The route had changed. My drop-off point was completely different now, somewhere way outside the city. I felt a jolt of panic. "Sir, I think there's a mistake. That's not my address." Still, he said nothing. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can you turn around?" The driver's hands tightened on the wheel. His knuckles turned white. My pulse pounded in my ears. Something was wrong, very wrong. I reached for my phone to cancel the ride, but the screen glitched, lines of static tearing through the app. The GPS was frozen. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Sir, stop the car." Nothing. I clenched my jaw, forcing my voice louder. I said, "Stop the car." Then finally he spoke, a raspy, almost mechanical voice. "It's too late for that." Cold fear stabbed through me. I lunged for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. The lock was engaged. My breath came fast and shallow. "Let me out right now." The driver didn't answer. Instead, he smiled. It was the kind of smile that made my blood turn to ice. I grabbed the emergency unlock button on the app, but my phone died in my hand. No warning, no low battery, just dead. The car picked up speed. The city lights were gone now, replaced by endless dark roads stretching into nowhere. The trees lining the road grew thicker, taller, swallowing the sky. It felt like we were leaving reality itself. I pounded on the window. "Somebody help," the driver chuckled, a low, dry laugh that made my skin crawl. "No one can hear you out here." I was trapped. Every instinct screamed at me to fight, to do something before we reached whatever hell he was driving me to. I glanced around, searching for anything, a sharp object, a weakness in the lock, anything. Then I noticed something in the front seat, something I should have seen before. The ID on the dashboard, the driver's name and picture. The photo didn't match the man in the driver's seat. My breath caught in my throat. "Who the hell are you?" The driver didn't answer. My fingers trembled as I reached for the window controls. They were locked. My only option was the door. I slid my hand down to the handle, slowly, carefully, praying he wouldn't notice. Then, suddenly, the car swerved. I screamed as the tires screeched, the car jerking violently to the side. My head slammed against the window. Stars exploded in my vision. When I looked up, we were no longer on any kind of road. We were in the middle of the woods. The engine hummed as the driver rolled to a stop. My entire body was shaking. The man turned to me slowly, his face barely visible in the darkness. But then, something changed. His features shifted, his skin rippled. For a moment it looked like his face was glitching, like he wasn't even real, like he was something else. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. Then he whispered, "We're here." Before I could react, the door beside me unlocked. The door didn't just unlock, it opened. A freezing wind rushed in, and outside, standing in the trees, were figures. Silent, motionless figures. Dozens of them. No faces, no eyes, just dark shapes, waiting. The driver leaned toward me, so close I could feel his breath on my skin. His voice was barely audible. Run. My body finally obeyed. I bolted. I stumbled out, crashing onto the dirt, gasping for air. The figures didn't move, didn't chase. They just watched. The car's headlights flickered, the engine roaring. When I turned back, the driver was gone. The car started reversing on its own, disappearing into the night. And then, so did the figures. I ran until my legs gave out, until I saw the distant glow of streetlights in the distance. I never told anyone what happened, never reported the ride, because when I checked my app the next day, there was no record of the ride at all. Story number 3, drop off at nowhere. I should have listened to my gut. The moment I stepped into that car, something felt wrong. It was past midnight, and I had just finished a long shift at work. The streets were nearly empty, the city eerily quiet, except for the occasional sound of a distant car. I ordered an Uber like I always did, expecting a routine ride home. My phone buzzed. Driver arriving in 2 minutes. The car that pulled up was a dark blue sedan, older than most rides I'd taken before. The headlights flickered slightly as it rolled to a stop. I hesitated before getting in. Something felt off. The driver didn't greet me, didn't even look at me. He just nodded at the screen and started driving. His face was barely visible in the dim light, but I noticed deep wrinkles on his forehead. His jaw clenched tight like he was forcing himself to stay calm. His hands gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself I was just tired. The first few minutes passed in silence. The only sound was the soft hum of the tires on the pavement. I checked my phone. The app showed the ride was in progress, estimated arrival time 20 minutes. Then the car took a turn. I frowned. The route on my phone didn't match. I think you missed a turn," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The driver didn't answer. I leaned forward slightly. "Sir, I think we're going the wrong way." Still nothing. My stomach twisted. The car kept moving, further away from the main roads, deeper into unfamiliar streets. My phone screen suddenly flickered, and the map disappeared. The ride was still active, but my destination was gone. I stared at it, heart pounding. That wasn't possible. I swallowed hard. "Can you pull over for a second?" No reaction. The driver just kept driving. The city lights faded behind us. The streets became narrower, more isolated. I pressed the door lock button, but it wouldn't budge. My throat tightened as I checked the window controls. They didn't work either. My voice shook. "Where are we going?" Finally, the driver spoke. "We're almost there." I felt ice crawl up my spine. Almost where? His grip on the wheel tightened. His voice was hollow. "Drop-off point." I glanced at my phone again, trying to cancel the ride. The button wouldn't respond. I tapped it over and over, but nothing worked. The app was frozen, the signal gone. I turned back to the driver, heart hammering. "Listen, just let me out here. I'll walk." The car didn't stop. I fought to keep my breathing steady. My fingers curled around my bag, my mind racing. If he wouldn't stop, I'd have to force him to. I looked for anything I could use, a sharp object, anything, when suddenly the car jerked to a stop. The engine idled. Outside there was nothing, no houses, no street lights, just an open stretch of barren land. A thick mist clung to the ground, curling around dead trees in the distance. My breath hitched. This wasn't a neighborhood, this wasn't anywhere. The driver turned off the car. Silence swallowed the air. I felt my chest tighten. "What is this?" He finally turned to look at me. For the first time I saw his face clearly. His skin was pale, too pale. His eyes were dark, sunken, lifeless. There was something horribly wrong with the way his mouth curled into a forced smile. "You should run," he whispered. My blood ran cold. The door beside me unlocked. It clicked open on its own. A freezing gust of wind rushed in, carrying a scent that made my stomach twist, damp earth, metal, decay. I stayed frozen. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my body refused to move. My gaze flickered past the open door, and that's when I saw them, figures in the mist, tall, watching. They stood in the distance, motionless, their outlines barely visible through the thick fog. I couldn't see their faces, but I could feel their gaze locked onto me. My chest heaved, my fingers gripping the edge of the seat. "Who are they?" I choked out. The driver didn't blink. "They've been waiting." A sharp ringing filled my ears. Every muscle in my body screamed to run, to get out, but I was trapped in my own terror. The figures began to move, not walking, not running, gliding, closer. The driver turned his head toward them and smiled. "Time's up." That was it. I bolted. I lunged out of the car, stumbling onto the freezing dirt. My legs nearly gave out, but I forced them to move. The figures in the mist shifted, their forms flickering like a glitch in reality. My breath came in ragged gasps as I ran blindly. My only thought was to get away. The car's headlights flickered behind me. A soft whisper followed, threading through the air like a song. Not words, not human. I ran until my lungs burned, until the mist swallowed everything around me. The ground beneath me felt wrong, too soft, like something was shifting underneath. I didn't dare look back. Then, without warning, silence. The air stilled. The whispers stopped. I turned, chest heaving. The car was gone. The figures were gone. The mist had thinned, revealing a cracked, abandoned road stretching endlessly into the dark. The only sound was my own breathing. My phone buzzed violently in my pocket. I yanked it out, hands shaking. Ride complete. My screen showed my original drop-off location, as if I had arrived home safely. I stood there frozen, gripping my phone like a lifeline. The app's interface looked normal. The ride history showed the trip ending right in front of my house, but I was nowhere near home. I never reported it, never spoke about it, but every night since then I check the street before I get into a car, because somewhere out there that driver is still picking up passengers, and I don't think they ever make it home. Story number 4, The Driver Who Never Left. I remember the night too clearly, the night I got into a car that should not have been there. It was raining, one of those cold, steady downpours that made the city look blurry under flickering streetlights. I had just left a friend's apartment after a long, exhausting day and wanted nothing more than to be home. I ordered an Uber and stood under the awning, watching the rain soak the pavement. A notification popped up. Driver arriving in 2 minutes. A black sedan rolled up sooner than expected, its tires cutting through the waterlogged street. I checked my phone. The make and model matched. The driver's name appeared, Daniel. His profile picture was an older man, mid-50s, with deep wrinkles and tired eyes. The car idled in front of me, the windshield wipers scraping slowly. I hesitated for a second before pulling open the door and sliding into the back seat. The interior smelled like damp fabric and something else, something faintly metallic. The driver didn't speak, just nodded at me in the mirror before pulling away from the curb. His hands gripped the wheel tightly, fingers pale against the dark leather. The ride was quiet, except for the occasional soft hum of the engine and the pattering rain. A few minutes in, I realized something odd. The roads were nearly deserted, yet the driver never slowed for intersections. He made each turn with precision, like he had driven this route 100 times. I glanced at my phone. My reception was gone. The app still showed my route, but my drop-off time kept fluctuating. 12 minutes, 20, 30. My stomach twisted. I cleared my throat. "Hey, I think the app's glitching. How much longer?" The driver didn't respond. I leaned forward slightly. "Sir?" He kept driving. A chill spread through my chest. "Can you hear me?" Still nothing. I stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His eyes didn't blink. He didn't even look like he was breathing. My fingers tensed around my phone. Then finally his lips moved. "You again." A sharp sting of fear crawled up my spine. "What?" The car picked up speed. "You always come back," he murmured,
almost to himself. His voice was raspy, distant, as if the words were being pulled from somewhere deep inside him. My throat tightened. I think you have me confused with someone else." He let out a slow, wheezing breath. "Number, it's always you." I reached for the door handle. Locked. My pulse thundered in my ears. "I don't know what you mean. Just pull over. I'll get out here." The driver shook his head, his fingers flexing against the wheel. "Not yet." The rain outside grew heavier, the windows fogging up. The streetlights blurred into streaks of yellow and white. The city felt impossibly far away. I took a shaky breath. "I'll report this," I threatened, though my voice came out weaker than I intended. The driver laughed softly. The sound was hollow. "You already did." My heart stilled. "What?" His grip on the wheel tightened. "You reported me, a year ago." I tried to swallow, but my throat was too dry. My fingers fumbled to refresh the app. The screen glitched, flickering. The ride history loaded, scrolling on its own faster and faster, before stopping at a date I didn't recognize.
Exactly 1 year ago. My heart pounded. The details were there, same route, same car, same driver, but there was something else. A notification. Trip reported. Driver passed away in accident. My stomach dropped. I looked up at the rearview mirror again. The driver was smiling. "You said I was driving too fast," he said softly. "You said I was reckless." My breath turned shallow. "You were right," he whispered. The car suddenly jerked. The tires screeched as we veered off the road. I screamed, bracing myself as the car hurtled forward, the world outside turning into a blur of dark shapes and rain. The impact never came. Instead, the car rolled to a slow, unnatural stop. The rain had ceased, but outside was nothing but an endless stretch of road, no city lights in sight. The air inside the car was suffocating. The driver turned in his seat for the first time. His face was wrong. His skin looked stretched, paper-thin, his eyes hollow pits of darkness. His mouth twitched into something that might have once been a grin. "You always come back," he whispered. I didn't think. I just kicked the door as hard as I could. It burst open, and I scrambled out, falling onto the wet asphalt. My knees scraped against the road, but I didn't care. I ran. The sound of the engine roared behind me. The headlights flickered erratically. And then, silence. I stopped, panting, my chest heaving. The car was gone. No sign of it. No sound. Just empty road stretching into the night. I pulled out my phone with shaking fingers. The screen was normal. The app was closed. No record of the ride. I walked the rest of the way home. I never told anyone what happened. I deleted the app the next morning, but sometimes, when I walk past a street late at night, I hear it. The low hum of an idling engine, the faint whisper of tires rolling toward me. And I know he's still out there, still driving, still waiting. Story number 5. Passenger from the other side. I never believed in ghosts. Not really. But after that night, I don't think I can call myself a skeptic anymore. It was late, past 2 a.m., and I was exhausted. I had spent the evening with a friend across town, and by the time I checked my phone, I knew there was no way I was taking the subway alone. So I ordered an Uber. The car arrived within minutes. A white sedan, older but clean. The driver, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a neutral expression, greeted me with a nod. "For Mia?" she asked. I confirmed and got in. The ride started off normal. Quiet streets, the occasional red light stretching the time. I leaned back, watching the glow of passing storefronts flicker across the windows. Then a few minutes in, the driver spoke. "You live in a nice area." I blinked, caught off guard. Yeah. It's quiet." She nodded but didn't say anything else. Something about her voice felt distant, like she wasn't really talking to me but to herself. I checked my phone. Estimated arrival, 10 minutes. A minute later, she spoke again. "You heading home alone tonight?" I stiffened slightly. It was an innocent enough question, but something about the way she asked it made my skin prickle. I forced a casual tone. "Yeah, just tired." She hummed in response. Then after a pause, she added, "Strange. I had another ride from this area earlier, a woman around your age." I glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror. "Oh?" She gave me an old address, a house that doesn't exist anymore. A chill spread through my chest. "What do you mean?" The driver sighed, tapping her fingers against the wheel. "I mean, I picked her up right from where I got you. Same spot. She got in, quiet girl, barely spoke. Gave me the address, so I drove." She turned onto a dark road, the city fading behind us. "When I got there," she continued, "it was just nothing. A burned-down house, charred remains, been abandoned for years." I felt a tightness in my throat. Maybe she got the address wrong. The driver gave a humorless chuckle, that's what I thought. But when I turned around to tell her, she was gone. The air in the car seemed to shift. My skin prickled. "Gone?" She nodded. "Door never opened. No sound. Just empty seat." My stomach twisted. Maybe she slipped out. The driver met my eyes in the mirror. I checked the app after. The ride was still active. The passenger was still marked as on trip. A heavy silence settled between us. My grip on my phone tightened. "That's weird," she sighed. "Weird things happen in this job. People get in and never get out." I tried to shake off the creeping unease. Maybe she was just messing with me, trying to scare me for fun. But her voice didn't have that playful edge. It was flat, distant. We kept driving in silence, the streetlights growing fewer, the roads darker. I checked my phone again. 6 minutes left. Then out of nowhere the driver murmured, "She looked like you know." My chest went ice cold. "What?" She nodded slowly. "Same hair, same build. Even sat in the same seat as you." I forced a nervous laugh. "That's a creepy coincidence." She didn't laugh. Something about the air felt different, heavier. I stared at my phone, willing the time to move faster. But the seconds seemed to crawl, stretching out unnaturally long. The road ahead was dark. No other cars. Just us. Then the driver spoke again. "She said something before she vanished." I swallowed hard. "What?" She hesitated. Then, in a quiet, almost reluctant voice, she whispered, "Tell her I made it home." A wave of cold rushed over me. I sat up straight, heart hammering. What does that mean?" The driver shrugged. "I don't know. But the second she disappeared, my GPS changed. Took me straight back to where I picked her up." I was breathing too fast. "You think she was—" She cut me off. "I don't think, I know." My mouth felt dry. My fingers trembled around my phone. The street outside was completely dark now. No houses, no signs, just a long, endless road. I forced a shaky breath. How long ago did this happen? The driver was silent for a moment. Then she said, 1 year ago tonight." My stomach twisted violently. My ears started ringing. I glanced at the app again, and my heart nearly stopped. My ride history had changed. The trip was no longer active. It was marked completed. But the drop-off address was different. It wasn't my home. It was an old, burned-down house. I gasped, turning to the driver. "Stop the car." She didn't react. My breath hitched. I said, "Stop the—" Then I saw it, in the rearview mirror. The reflection in my seat wasn't mine. A girl sat where I was, staring back at me with hollow, dark eyes. She looked just like me, same hair, same build. But her face was wrong, pale, stretched, empty. She opened her mouth. "I made it home." The car screeched to a stop. I lunged for the door, tumbling out onto the freezing pavement. My breath came in ragged gasps as I scrambled to my feet, my head spinning. The car was gone. The road was empty. I stood there, shaking, staring into the darkness. My phone buzzed violently in my hand. A new notification. "Thanks for riding with Uber. Hope you made it home safely." I never took another ride after that, because I don't think I was ever supposed to leave that car. And sometimes, late at night, when I walk past the place where she was picked up, I feel like someone is still waiting. Story number 6. shadow in the back seat. I noticed it the moment I got in the car, a shift in the air, a wrongness I couldn't name. It was past 1 a.m., and the city was quieter than usual, the streets bathed in the sickly glow of flickering streetlights. I had spent the night at a friend's house, losing track of time, and by the time I stepped outside, an uneasy silence had settled over everything. I pulled out my phone, requested an Uber, and within minutes, a black sedan pulled up. The driver, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a stiff nod, didn't say much as I got in. I buckled my seatbelt, checked my phone, 15-minute ride home. The car pulled away from the curb, and for the first few minutes, everything was normal. Rain had started drizzling, streaking the windows, the sound soft against the roof. I leaned back, exhausted, scrolling mindlessly through my messages. Then, something shifted. A feeling, like I wasn't alone. I froze, my thumb hovering over the screen. The hairs on my neck stood up. Slowly, I glanced at the rearview mirror, and that's when I saw it. A shape in the back seat. Not me, not the driver. Something else. A shadow, sitting perfectly still beside me. Too dark, too solid, blending into the dim light of the car's interior. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't move. The driver hadn't reacted. He was focused on the road, hands steady on the wheel. He didn't seem to notice that someone else was in the car. I swallowed hard, my fingers gripping my phone so tightly they ached. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Maybe it was a trick of the light, a reflection, but I knew it wasn't. I could feel it, the weight of its presence, the cold pressing against my skin. I shifted slightly, just enough to turn my head, just enough to see, and then it moved. Not much, just a tilt, like it was turning to look at me. My chest tightened. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to stay calm, but every instinct screamed at me to run. The driver's voice broke the silence. "You okay back there?" I jumped. My eyes snapped to the mirror again. The shadow was gone. I blinked, my pulse still hammering in my ears. Had I imagined it? Was I losing it from exhaustion? I forced out a weak laugh. Yeah, just tired. The driver hummed in response, nodding slightly. The car kept moving, rain still tapping against the windshield. I dared to exhale, telling myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks on me. And then I felt it. Breath, right against my ear, cold, slow, deliberate. I froze. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't alone. A whisper followed, so faint it was barely a sound. "Don't look." Ice filled my veins, my body locked up. I clenched my hands into fists, nails digging into my palms. My entire being screamed at me to turn, to look, to see what was right beside me. But I didn't. I kept my eyes locked on the front seat, on the road ahead, on anything but the empty space beside me. The driver glanced at me again in the mirror, his brows furrowed. "You sure you're okay?" I tried to nod, but my body wouldn't move. Then I saw it, his face, his reflection in the mirror. His eyes weren't on me. They were locked on something behind me. His face paled. His knuckles went white on the wheel. He opened his mouth to speak, and the car jerked. The tires screeched. My body slammed into the door. The driver cursed, struggling to control the car as it swerved violently before coming to a shaky stop. The silence that followed was deafening. My breathing was ragged, my chest tight with fear. The driver's hands trembled on the wheel. He turned slowly, his face tight with something I couldn't name. "Get out," he said. I stared at him. "What?" His voice was hoarse. "Get out." Something in his eyes told me not to argue. I fumbled with the door, hands shaking so hard I could barely grip the handle. It finally gave way, and I stumbled out into the cold night air. The door slammed shut behind me. The car peeled away, tires screeching against the wet pavement, disappearing into the dark. I stood there, shaking, my breath coming in short gasps. When I finally dared to look around, I realized something. I was nowhere near home. The road stretched empty in both directions. No street signs, no lights, no houses. I checked my phone, my fingers trembling. The ride history was blank. No record of the trip. No sign I had ever been in that car. But the cold lingered. And somewhere in the darkness behind me, I heard it again. A breath. Close. Waiting. Story number 7. The ride that never happened. I never got into that car. I know that for a fact. It was a Saturday night, and I had been out with friends, drinking just enough to feel light-headed, but still aware of my surroundings. By the time I stepped outside, the streets were almost deserted, the neon glow of bars reflecting off wet pavement. I pulled out my phone and ordered an Uber. The driver's name was Mark, a silver sedan, 3 minutes away. I stood under a street lamp, rubbing my arms against the cold. The app showed the car approaching, but before it arrived, my friend Jake jogged up to me from inside the bar. "Hey, don't take an Uber," he said, breathless. "I'm heading the same way. I'll drop you off." I hesitated for a second before canceling the ride. The car wasn't even there yet. I climbed into Jake's car, grateful for the warmth, and we drove off, laughing about the night. I didn't think about the canceled ride again until the next morning. I woke up to a notification on my phone. "Thanks for riding with Uber. Hope you had a great trip." I frowned, sitting up in bed. That wasn't possible. I had canceled the ride. I clicked on the notification, opening the trip history. The ride was completed. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. The map showed the car's route, from the bar to my apartment. Exact time, exact location. But I had never been in that car. A cold unease settled in my stomach. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe the driver had started the ride before I canceled it. But the time matched perfectly with when Jake and I were on the road. I clicked on the driver's profile, Mark Silver Sedan, my stomach twisted. There was no profile picture. I scrolled down. No reviews, no rating. Just a name. Something about it made my hands go cold. I closed the app and tried to shake it off. It was probably just a system error, but I couldn't ignore the feeling in my gut that something wasn't right. That night, I had a dream. Or at least, I think it was a dream. I was back at the bar, standing under the street lamp. The Uber pulled up. The silver sedan. My phone buzzed, confirming, "Your ride has arrived." I felt myself moving, stepping toward the car. The door opened on its own, and then I saw inside. The interior was dark, impossibly dark, like the seats and floors stretched into some endless void. The driver sat in the front seat, unmoving. His hands rested on the wheel, but something was wrong with them. The fingers were too long, too thin, the knuckles stretched tight under pale skin. His head turned slowly. I couldn't see his face, just a blur where features should have been. A whisper filled the car, though his lips never moved. "You were supposed to get in." I woke up gasping, my skin cold and clammy. My phone buzzed on my nightstand. I grabbed it with shaking hands. Another notification from Uber. "Rate your trip with Mark." I stared at it, my chest tightening. I never took that ride. I know I never took that ride. I opened the app again, my breath coming fast. I went to the help section, trying to report the trip as a mistake, but the ride was gone. No record of it. No trip history. It was like it never happened. I closed the app and forced myself to breathe. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe I was just overtired, drunk, paranoid. But then, a week later, I was out late again, walking home this time. The streets were quiet, the air heavy with the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. A car pulled up beside me, a silver sedan. My breath caught in my throat. The passenger window rolled down slowly, and a voice, low, empty, came from the front seat. "You forgot to take your ride." I didn't look. I didn't speak. I ran. I ran until my lungs burned, until I reached my building and locked the door behind me. My hands shook as I pressed my forehead against the wood, trying to steady my breath. When I finally turned around, my phone buzzed. One new notification. "Your ride has been canceled. We'll see you next time." I deleted the app that night, but sometimes, when I walk home late at night, I feel it. The presence of a car rolling up just a little too close, the sound of a door unlocking, and a voice, barely above a whisper, waiting for me to finally get in. Story number 8. The Driver's Secret. I knew something was wrong the moment I got into that car. It was a cold night, the streets quiet except for the occasional hum of passing cars. I had stayed late at a friend's apartment and decided to take an Uber home. It wasn't my first late-night ride, and I didn't think twice before booking one. The car arrived faster than expected. A black sedan, older than the usual models but clean. The driver's name was Liam. I slid into the back seat, pulling my coat tighter around me. "Hey," I muttered, out of habit. The driver didn't respond. His eyes stayed locked on the road as he pulled away, his hands gripping the wheel a little too tight. Something about the silence felt heavier than usual. I exhaled, shaking off the unease. I pulled out my phone and checked the route. 15 minutes home. A few minutes in, I started noticing things. The car had a strange smell. Not the usual mix of air freshener and worn-out leather. It was sharper, almost metallic, mixed with something else. Something rotten. My stomach twisted, but I kept quiet. Then I saw them. Long, deep scratches on the inside of the door, right next to the handle. I frowned. My fingers brushed over them absent-mindedly. The marks weren't old. The grooves were fresh, like someone had desperately tried to claw their way out. A cold prickle ran down my spine. I forced a laugh, trying to shake off the sudden chill. Rough passengers? The driver's hands tensed on the wheel. Something like that. His voice was low, hoarse, like he didn't use it often. My stomach churned. Something about the way he said it felt off. I tried to ignore the feeling, shifting my focus to my phone, but then I noticed something else. The child lock was on. I swallowed hard. "Hey, can you turn off the child lock, just in case I need to get out fast?" I tried to keep my voice light, casual. The driver's lips twitched into something that was almost a smile, but not quite. Why would you need to get out fast? A chill ran through my body. My fingers curled tighter around my phone. The GPS showed we were still on track, 10 minutes left. I just needed to make it home. I glanced up at the rearview mirror, trying to catch a better look at his face. His eyes were dark, unreadable, but there was something strange about them, something empty. Then, just as I was about to look away, I saw it. The trunk. It was slightly open. Just a crack. I wouldn't have noticed if the car hadn't hit a bump, making it shift slightly. My throat went dry. There was something inside. A glimpse of fabric, something dark, bundled up, motionless. I couldn't breathe. The scratches on the door, the smell, the silence. I knew, without a doubt, that whatever was in that trunk wasn't supposed to be there. I forced myself to stay calm. My mind raced. If I panicked, I'd make a mistake. I needed to get out. I tapped the screen of my phone, pretending to text. My heart pounded as I sent a single message to my friend. "Call me now." Seconds later, my phone rang. I pressed it to my ear before the driver could react. "Hey," I said loudly, forcing a laugh. "Yeah, I'm almost home." The driver didn't say anything, but I saw his fingers tighten on the wheel. "Yeah, my brother's already outside waiting for me," I continued, keeping my tone casual. "I'll be there in 5. I didn't have a brother. The driver's grip loosened slightly. He exhaled through his nose, as if thinking. Then he smiled. Not a normal smile. Something else. "There's no one waiting for you." Ice filled my veins. I forced a breath. "Excuse me?" His smile didn't falter. "I drove you before." My blood ran cold. "No, you didn't." He nodded slowly. "Yeah. A couple months ago you were drunk, didn't remember much. I took you home safe." I stared at him, heart pounding. "That wasn't you." His eyes flickered to mine in the mirror. "Are you sure?" The car suddenly slowed. We were still 5 minutes from my apartment. There was no stop sign, no traffic light, nothing. Just an empty road. My breath hitched. "Why are we stopping?" The driver tilted his head. "You ever hear about the ones who get away?"
The word sent a sick shiver through me. I tightened my grip on my phone, ready to make a run for it, but then I heard it. A thud. From the trunk. A muffled sound. A whimper. My stomach dropped. Someone was in there. Someone alive. The driver sighed, almost disappointed. Guess I didn't tie that one up tight enough. My body acted before my mind could. I slammed my hand against the horn, holding it down, the blaring sound cutting through the night. The driver snapped. His expression twisted, and before he could react, I unlocked my phone and hit emergency call. "Help! I'm in a black sedan license plate." The car lurched. I slammed into the door as he yanked the wheel, sending us skidding onto the shoulder. I didn't wait. The second we stopped, I kicked at the door as hard as I could. It didn't open. The child lock was still on. The driver turned, his face twisting into something monstrous. "You shouldn't have done that." The trunk slammed open. A woman fell out. She was bound, gagged, her eyes wide with terror as she hit the pavement. The driver lunged for me, but in the chaos, he must have forgotten. The driver's side wasn't locked. The woman, somehow, someway, managed to yank the door open from the outside. I threw myself out of the car, hitting the ground hard. The woman scrambled beside me, sobbing. The driver cursed, slamming his fist against the dashboard, but I didn't stay to watch. We ran. I didn't stop until I saw headlights in the distance. Another car, an actual car, one that wasn't hunting me down. The police arrived minutes later. The driver was gone. His car was abandoned, the trunk still open, but there was no sign of him. The woman, her name was Claire, had been missing for 2 days. She had no idea where he had taken her, only that she had been tied up, trapped, waiting for what came next. The scariest part, the app had no record of my ride. The license plate didn't match any registered Uber driver. The man didn't exist. But he was out there, and I knew, deep in my bones, that he wasn't done looking for his next passenger.
Story number 9. The Phantom Fare. I've been driving for rideshare services for years, and I've seen all kinds of passengers. Drunk ones, angry ones, the ones who treat you like a therapist. But nothing prepared me for the night I picked up a fare that wasn't supposed to exist. It was past midnight, a slow night, and I was about to head home when a request popped up. The location was on the outskirts of town, near an old stretch of road I rarely drove through. The fare was good, almost too good, but I figured someone might have broken down or needed a ride home from a party. I arrived at the pickup spot, a dirt road leading to an abandoned-looking house, its windows dark, its paint peeling from years of neglect. My headlights barely pierced through the thick fog that had rolled in. I waited, checked the app. The passenger's name was Lena. No profile picture, no rating. I drummed my fingers against the steering wheel. "Lena?" I called out, peering into the darkness. A shape emerged from the shadows. A woman wearing an old-fashioned dress that looked oddly out of place. She moved slowly, almost too smoothly, as if her feet barely touched the ground. As she approached, the dim glow of the street lamp revealed her pale face, her dark, sunken eyes. She opened the door and slid into the back seat. Her presence sent an unnatural chill through the car, the kind that settles deep into your bones. The air felt heavier. I swallowed. Hey, going to..." I checked the app. The destination had already been entered, a house on the other side of town. She nodded, didn't speak. I forced a polite smile. All right then. The ride started off quiet. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the occasional tap of rain against the windshield. Something about her presence made me uneasy, but I told myself she was just shy, maybe even unwell. Then in the rearview mirror I caught something strange. Her reflection was wrong. It was there, but delayed. Every time I moved, it took a second before her reflection mimicked it, like a lagging video. A chill ran down my spine. I kept my eyes on the road. The silence stretched until I couldn't take it any more. "So, long night?" I asked, trying to break the tension. She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to see it one last time." I frowned. "See what?" She didn't answer. I glanced at the GPS. 10 more minutes. The road was dark, barely lit, stretching on endlessly like it led to nowhere. Then I smelled it. A faint burnt scent. At first I thought it was coming from outside, but it grew stronger, filling the car, clinging to my clothes. My throat tightened. It smelled like charred wood. And something worse. I looked at her reflection again. She was smiling. Not at me. At something behind me. I nearly slammed on the brakes. My hands clenched the wheel. My breath came fast and shallow. There's no one else back there, right? I forced out, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't respond. I flicked my eyes toward the rearview mirror again. The back seat wasn't empty. A second figure sat beside her, a dark shape barely visible but watching me. I swerved. My tires skidded. I gasped for air as I forced the car straight again. 5 minutes left. My pulse thundered in my ears. "You—" My voice cracked. "You need me to take you somewhere else?" Her gaze met mine in the mirror, unblinking. "Number. This is where I belong." The burning smell grew overwhelming. My chest tightened, nausea twisting my stomach. 3 minutes left. The trees lining the road grew denser, swallowing what little light remained. The world outside looked wrong, almost warped, like we were driving into another reality. Then I saw the house. Or what was left of it. It was nothing but ruins. Charred wood, collapsed beams, blackened remains of a home that had burned down long ago. My headlights illuminated the remnants of a scorched staircase leading to nothing. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. This isn't a house." She smiled. It was. My breath came in short gasps. "I used to live here," she continued softly, her voice distant, as if remembering something from long ago. "Before the fire." I swallowed, my throat dry. "What fire?" She turned to look at me fully now. "The one that killed me." My blood ran cold. I whipped around to look at her. The back seat was empty. The air inside the car turned unbearably heavy. The burnt smell vanished, replaced by an overwhelming silence. I couldn't breathe. My head spun. I gripped the wheel, forcing myself to stay calm. The app dinged. Ride complete. I stared at my phone. There was no one in my car. There never had been. The screen showed the fare. The ride was recorded, but the passenger's name was gone. No Lena. No history of the trip. Just the address of a house that had burned down 20 years ago. I didn't move for a long time. Then from the darkness of the ruins a shadow shifted. A figure stood there watching me. I didn't wait to see what it was. I floored the gas, my tires screeching as I sped away from the house, from the ashes, from whatever had been in my back seat. But even now, when I check my mirror at night, I see her, sitting in the back seat, waiting for her next ride. Story number 10. The Whispering GPS. The night started like any other, just another shift, another set of strangers getting into my car, paying me to take them somewhere else. I'd been driving for Uber for nearly 2 years, and by now, nothing surprised me. Drunks, talkers, awkward silence, it was all part of the job. That night I was exhausted. It was past 2 a.m., and I was thinking about heading home when a new ride request popped up. The pickup was on the edge of town, near a highway exit that barely anyone used. The destination wasn't listed yet, just to be entered by rider. I hesitated for a second, my gut telling me to skip this one, but the fare was good. Too good. I accepted the ride. The streets were empty as I drove, streetlights flickering past in a rhythmic blur. The further I got from the city, the quieter it became. No cars, no people, just the distant hum of the highway. When I pulled up to the pin, I expected to see someone waiting, but there was no one. I sighed and checked my phone. Rider has been notified. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. I was about to cancel when a voice crackled through my GPS speaker. Drive. My breath caught in my throat. The voice wasn't robotic, not like the usual GPS instructions. It was low, whispery, almost human. I glanced at my screen. The route had changed. A new destination had been entered. I hadn't touched my phone. A chill ran down my spine. I looked around. The road was empty, dark stretches of asphalt disappearing into the distance. I leaned over, squinting out my window, trying to see if someone was hiding in the shadows. Nothing. Then the voice spoke again. Drive. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to leave, to cancel the trip and get the hell out of there, but I didn't. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was sheer stupidity. But my hands tightened on the wheel and I started driving. The road twisted, taking me further from the city, deeper into nowhere. The new route led to a place I didn't recognize, off the main highway, down a road that didn't even have a name on the map. The GPS screen flickered, then another whisper. Turn right. My throat tightened. There was no right turn, just trees, an endless stretch of dark woods lining the side of the road. But the GPS insisted there was a turn, a road that didn't exist. I slowed down, my breath coming short and quick. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone to cancel the ride. The screen froze. I tapped it again, nothing. Then through the speakers I heard something that made my stomach drop. Breathing, slow, ragged, not mine. I turned the volume down. The breathing didn't stop. My chest tightened. Someone, something, was breathing through my GPS. I slammed my foot on the gas. The car roared forward, tires screeching against the pavement. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get out. The whispers grew louder, layered voices, overlapping, murmuring something I couldn't understand. My ears rang with it, my vision blurring from sheer panic. Then the screen glitched. For a fraction of a second I saw it. A face. Not human. Not anything I could describe. Hollow, dark, stretched too wide, as if it had been screaming for a long, long time. Then, silence. My GPS shut off completely. The car skidded to a stop at an intersection. I gasped for air, my body trembling, my hands locked in a death grip on the wheel. My phone rebooted itself, flickering back to life. The Uber app was open, but the ride was gone. No record of it, no route, no rider, just a notification at the top of my screen. Thank you for the ride. I drove home in silence. I never told anyone what happened, never reported it. But sometimes late at night when my car is idling at a stoplight, my GPS flickers, and I swear for just a second, I hear it. A whisper. Turn right. Story number 11. The Passenger Who Knew Too Much. It was past midnight when I stepped into the Uber. The city streets were nearly empty, bathed in the dim glow of flickering streetlights. The driver, a man in his late 40s, gave me a polite nod before tapping the screen to start the ride. The car smelled faintly of old leather and something else, something metallic, like rust. I leaned back, exhausted from the long shift at work. Just as I was about to close my eyes, the driver spoke. You must be tired, late shift at Thompson & Company, right? My body stiffened. I never mentioned where I worked. The app only showed my name and pickup location. I forced a chuckle. Yeah. How did you know? He kept his eyes on the road, a small smirk forming on his lips. I've driven you before. A strange sensation crawled up my spine. I used Uber often, but I had no memory of this man. His face was completely unfamiliar. Maybe, I said hesitantly. I don't really remember. His smirk widened. That's the thing, though. You should. The way he said it made my skin prickle. I shifted uncomfortably and glanced at my phone. The screen showed the route, but my destination felt farther than usual. Hey, are we taking a different way tonight? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He chuckled, the sound dry and humorless. Relax. I always take this route with you. That didn't make sense. I always took the highway home, quick, direct, but now we were heading down unfamiliar roads, the street signs unfamiliar, the buildings getting sparser. I tapped the app to check the route. The screen glitched. The blue line kept shifting, recalibrating as if it couldn't decide where we were. I swallowed hard. I think we should turn back. This doesn't seem right. He let out a slow sigh, shaking his head. Come on now. You say that every time. Every time? Something in his tone made my heart pound. I looked at him properly now. His eyes flickered toward me in the rearview mirror, dark, unreadable. I cleared my throat. "I don't remember you driving me before." Silence. Then, in an almost playful whisper, he said, "You wouldn't." The air in the car felt heavier. My fingers hovered over the door handle, but before I could react, he spoke again. "You always try to get out early, always get nervous, then you start remembering." I gritted my teeth. "Remember what?" He laughed softly, shaking his head. "We have a routine. You panic. You check your phone. Then you realize—" I looked at my phone again. The ride had no start time, no estimated arrival. The app wasn't showing any driver details. I tapped frantically at the screen, but it was frozen. "I need to get out." I tried to keep my voice steady, but my pulse was hammering. "You always say that," he muttered, almost to himself. "Every damn time." I reached for the door handle, but the locks clicked shut. I snapped my head up. "Let me out, now." He let out a slow breath, shaking his head. "You never make it past this part." Panic surged through me. I slammed my fists against the window, yelling for help, but the streets were deserted. The buildings outside blurred together like smudged paint, unfamiliar and wrong. I turned back to him, my breath ragged. "Where are we going?" He grinned. "You always ask that next." I felt lightheaded, like reality was slipping through my fingers. My mind scrambled for logic. Maybe I had ridden with him before. Maybe it was some kind of twisted prank. But no, this was something else, something worse. Then he said something that turned my blood to ice. "You didn't come back last time." I froze. He continued, voice disturbingly calm. "Last time, you got out right here. Ran, screamed, then you were gone." The road outside was dark, lined with looming trees. It felt endless. I had no memory of this place. I swallowed hard. "What are you talking about?" His fingers drummed on the steering wheel. "It's always the same. I pick you up, you start freaking out, you run, and then—" He let the sentence hang. I gripped my phone tighter, struggling to think. He glanced at me through the mirror again, his eyes almost pitying. "How long do you think you've been doing this?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Check the date." My stomach twisted as I looked at my phone. The battery icon flickered, and the screen dimmed. The date wasn't today, it wasn't even this year. My breathing grew ragged. No, that's not possible." The driver nodded toward the window. "Look around." I turned my head slowly. The buildings were gone. The streets had melted into an expanse of nothing. No cars, no people. Just a void stretching in every direction. My hands trembled. I slammed my fist against the window again. "This isn't real." He sighed. "That's what you said last time, too." I clutched my seat, trying to ground myself, but everything felt surreal. Like I was floating between places I didn't belong. The driver rolled his shoulders, as if preparing for something. "Here's the part where you run." I grabbed the lock button, slamming it repeatedly. This time it clicked open. I didn't think. I launched myself out of the car, hitting the pavement hard. My knees scraped against rough asphalt. But I forced myself up and sprinted. The car didn't move, the driver didn't chase me, but his voice followed. "You'll be back." I ran until my lungs burned, until the world blurred around me. And then I woke up, in my bed, in my apartment. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I fumbled for my phone, nearly dropping it. The Uber app was open. A ride was still in progress. The driver's name was blank. The pickup time was 1 year ago. My fingers trembled as I scrolled. The ride history showed the same trip again and again, every few months, same route, same drop-off. And the worst part? I had no memory of any of them. I stared at the screen, feeling the weight of something I couldn't explain pressing against my chest. A notification popped up. "Your driver is waiting." I dropped my phone. The street outside was silent, except for the faint sound of an engine idling. If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more terrifying tales. And if you've ever had a creepy or unexplained experience, share it in the comments below. We'd love to hear your story. Also, check out the videos appearing on your screen right now for more spine-tingling horror. Stay safe and watch your back.